This is Matthew McConkey, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
A good day, fine people out there. Thank you once again for tuning in to the Matt Balaker podcast. It makes me so happy. We love doing this show for you, but what makes us particularly warm and fuzzy is when you like, subscribe, and encourage your friends and acquaintances to do the same thing. We have a really awesome guest tonight. He not only has great hair, he sounds very similar to a famous celebrity who grew up in Uvalde, Texas. He's one of the most prolific writers I've ever met. He's a proud Tennessean who roots for the Atlanta Braves. Please join me in welcoming Matthew McConkey to the podcast. How you doing, Matthew?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So how often are you confused with Matthew McConaughey?
Not really, except for the name. I just wish I had his money and looks. I mean, that was...
Well, you're pretty close on the looks. Money, I have not seen your bank account, but it looks like you have enough content out there to maybe one day get, within spitting distance to McConaughey's net worth. But you're a writer, and not just a writer, a very prolific one. Can you share with our audience how many books you've written?
Golly, I've probably got around, I'm going to say probably around maybe 6 or 7. I've probably got another 5 or 6 just sitting in the hard drive. We're trying to release one once a year. I've got a lot of stuff. I got enough stuff for the next 16 years.
Yeah. So has there been a 3-month period, Matthew, where you've not written a book in the last, call it 12 years?
Yeah, there has been. There was some time where I had to take some time off. My dad had died, and that really got it to where I couldn't really do anything. It just really shut me down as far as any creativity whatsoever, because when he died, it was such a it was a shock, because I talked to him the night before, and the next day I get a phone call. He had died walking across the parking lot, just dropped dead. And of course, you don't process stuff like that. And it took weeks for me to process that. And once I finally started dealing with it, I came back into my office here at home, probably because he died in January, and I got back into my office probably around, I want to say May of that year, and it just, nothing was coming. No creativity, nothing. It was just like everything had dried up.
Yeah, I mean, whenever there's a tragic event like that, you don't know how you're going to react, and you can't anticipate it. When did you feel comfortable writing again after your father's passing?
It was probably around October of 2019. That was when I think I had finally started dealing with a few things, put some things in perspective. And I came into the office, and one of the very first stories I wrote was a story that I had gotten into the Scarecrows and Shadows collection that had gotten published this year. And it was called 60-Point Game. And it was about my dad, who loved to tell stories. And he would always talk about this time he played junior high basketball where he scored 60 points more than the other team. And I was like, this is what I'm going to write for him. So I wrote that story in a way of dealing with some of that, because, the character in the short story did not go to the grave after his dad's death, and he kind of isolated himself away from it. So he eventually goes there, and while he's talking to his dad's grave, he meets this little boy, and they're having this conversation about life and mortality. And then you find out at the end of the story, after the main character goes home, he was actually talking to his dad as a little boy who was a ghost. So it was the character trying to deal with his own mortality, his dad's death, and that was kind of me dealing with all that.
Yeah. I mean, had you had any other kind of traumatic experiences or just monumental experiences that you used to funnel into one of your books?
Yeah, and see, that's the thing about being a writer. If you're going to write and come off authentic, you really have to have experiences. Dad's death in 2019. The next year, I go through a divorce. I was married for 20 years, and that was really traumatic. So it really starts warping your sense of who you are versus what you had in mind your life to be. So at 44, all these changes are happening, and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with everything all at once. And unlike the last time I had an event with Dad, this time with the divorce, I put a lot of energy into writing because that was the only way I could get feelings out. So I started incorporating how I was feeling into a lot of different characters, into a lot of different books. But between 2019 and probably up until midpoint this year, I have wrote, I'd say, a good 50 shorts and 3 novels.
Wow.
Because there was so much that's just bottled up. But I think I about got it all out now. So
they say the scariest thing for a writer is a blank page. And you've obviously confronted that, Matthew. How do you get past it?
I don't know. I've had writers, they'll email me, message me, and they'll say, how do you do it? How do you get past that first page? How do you go through it and start writing sentences? And I'm like, I just never let it bother me. I've never let a blank page bother me because I try to stay pretty strict on how I write. I try to write at least 1,000 words a day, something in any story or a story that I'm currently writing. I try to write 1,000 words a day. If you do that, you're not going to have writer's block. The only time I've had writer's block is when something traumatic has happened and I just can't get in that frame of mind. But if you stay disciplined, you can write every day.
So you do 1,000 words a day. Very impressive. What is your daily writing routine like?
Well, I've got a straight job. So usually I've been at the same job for 25 years, and that's just allowed me to do and live the way I want to live. So usually when I come home, I'll deal with the cat because I got a new cat. So I deal with the cat, play with her for a little bit. Then I'll come into my office. There's usually about 30, 45 minute decompression part. And I'll usually start working on what current project I have, or if I'm not feeling it, I'll go to any of the other open projects I have and I'll write on that. Sometimes the story takes you where it wants to go. And I definitely believe that because I've written stories where I thought they were going to be novels and they turn out to be maybe a 10,000 word short. And I've written short stories where they've turned out to be a novel. So you really have to chase wherever the book decides it wants you to go. And that's a huge thing for writers because a lot of writers will try to force where they want the book to go, and that never works out right.
So before you sit down, do you have an idea of what you want to write in these 1,000 words, or is it more stream of consciousness?
It's a stream of consciousness because I didn't know about stream of consciousness until I read Jack Kerouac. And
Me too.
Right. So Jack Kerouac, I remember the biggest thing with Kerouac is he's so dated right now. I mean, he's so generational. So if you didn't live in that time or grow up in that time, you're going to be hard pressed to catch a lot of his verbiage and his stream of consciousness, which is not for everybody. So when I do 1,000 words, I usually try to leave myself a scene to pick up the next day because a writer is only good as their momentum is going to carry over to the next day. It's like being in baseball. You got to have a winning streak. As a writer, you've got to be able to stop, whether you think you can write anymore or not, stop for the day when you've hit your limit. That way you have enough momentum to pick it back up and go another 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really try to do. Now, what I've learned in writing 1,000 words a day is that sometimes I'll stop at like 750 words and I've got nothing left.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, what in the hell am I going to do for 250 more words? And I really have to dig pretty deep to do that. But that really helps because it exercises your mind to come up with something.
That's a good point. Yeah. It's like you're on your fourth set of your bench press and you want to quit and you have to put up 2 more reps and you dig deep. And that's how you grow. That's how you get strong. How do you balance writing every day with also editing and revising work that you've done before?
The good thing about it is, and something I have learned a long time ago, was that I had to have a really good team around me. And the first several books, because I had been published before traditionally, and I didn't like really the whole process because the editors will come in and they want their voice instead of yours. So I didn't have a really good experience with that back in 2007. And I was like, I'm going to go on my own and really try something different. So I got an editor, I got a proofer, a cover artist, interior designer. And I said, here's what we're going to do. I want to do this book. I don't want people to just tell me, oh, hey, it's good. I want somebody to challenge me and say, here's what I would do to make it a little better without changing my voice. But I'll go through and write at least the book 3 times, usually 3. I met a writer one time who said he'd done his book 15 times. I was like, what the hell are you writing? I was like, there's no way you're doing a book 15 times. It's crazy. And he's like, yeah, I just can't get it perfect. And I'm like, there's no such thing as a perfect book.
Yeah. It's like I do it 18 times, it'll be perfection. But I'm not quite there yet.
Right. So I just I'll write it 3 times and then I send it to the editor and they'll tell me, hey, this scene doesn't work, or I would maybe add this scene, because the biggest thing for a reader is the flow of the book. Mm-hmm. If the book flows, everything else, you're going to engage the reader, because these days and times, nobody's reading as much. They'll read, but they do it in small increments.
Right. Or they'll scroll on your, people read books on their phones. I mean, that's something I never would have guessed, 15 years ago. But I want to learn about your first initial big break, Matthew, called toe tags and body bags.
Yeah.
What's the story there?
The story there was I had gotten this idea of just putting out some really rough, unedited stories, because at that point, it's 2005, 2006, and 2007. I didn't think anybody was looking. And I was like, I'm just going to do this and see what the hell happens. And this publishing company in my hometown was like, we can do this, but instead of giving you advance, how about we do like a profit sharing thing where you put up some, we'll put up some, and then we'll do something with royalties. And I was like, sure, there's nobody going to look. So whatever. Yeah. So we did. And this was back when bookstores, like independent bookstores, had a lot of power. Mm-hmm. And the local bookstores around were like, hey, we would like to put your book in our store. I was like, okay. So, we would put 50 in a couple bookstores and they sold out. And I'm like, okay, this is crazy. I did not expect that. So,
and so did they sell out? Did you just have a picture of your face on it, or, what was it that attracted people to it?
I don't know. I think what it was just a plain black cover, had my name, and it had the name of the book. That was it. That was literally it, because we were like, what kind of cover do you want? And I said, I don't care. Just do something generic. It doesn't really matter because nobody's looking. Mm-hmm. But then everybody started.
What way to sell it? It doesn't matter. Nobody's looking, but buy my manuscript.
Right.
I love the understatement. Yeah.
Right. And I, at the time I was like, it's whatever. And it didn't really hit me until the publisher called and they're like, hey, it was the Village Bookshop down where I live. they said that the owner had called and they want you to come down and sign some books. And I told my wife at the time, I was like, okay, I'll go see a couple people, no big deal. I get there and there's like 60 people waiting on me. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty real.
Yeah.
And it kind of scared me a little bit because I wasn't ready for that. Because when you're doing stuff like this, you don't know if people are looking. You don't know if people are reading you, so you have no idea. And yeah.
What was the inspiration for this book?
Not really anything. It was just a bunch of short stories I had written back when I was in junior high, and some in probably right before my senior year of high school. I just had them laying around, and I didn't have anything really new that I wanted to put out. And I was like, I'd like to put something out, so let's try this. So I took it to them. They really liked it. And it's like, we could do something with these. I was like, okay. And that was really it. I didn't really have any big major inspirations for that. It was just a bunch of stories I'd written from like 95 to probably about 2000, 2004.
Yeah.
It wasn't really anything major.
This was about 17 years ago, and much has changed in the publishing world. For listeners out there who aren't as kind of inside baseball when it comes to indie writing and traditional publishers, can you contrast the quote unquote traditional publishing route with independent publishing?
Indie publishing, to me, I think I read a number the other day. I think there was like 2.5 million titles or some crazy number like that published last year. That's like your Pattersons, your Kings, your indie writers, stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and that's great. But there's a lot of bad stuff out there too, So what happened was you had these traditional publishers back before technology really took a foothold in. They were the gatekeepers. They decided what was good, what was not, and we missed out on a lot of really good writers probably up until about 15, 20 years ago because they got told no. Their manuscript would just get put into a slush pile, or they would get a form letter, a rejection letter. And most of the time, a lot of these people didn't read it. When indie publishing came and you had the tools to actually go through and publish your own stuff, become your own publisher, it opened the doors up for everybody. But the problem is it opened the doors up for the people that didn't know what they were doing.
Right. The problem is it opened the doors for everybody. It's a double-edged sword. It
is. And I think what happened was you had really good writers that were doing it independent, but then you had, for every good writer, you had about 1,000 that were not that good, and it tarnished indie writing. So I think that's why indie writing gets a bad rap, is because anybody can do it, but only smart people really know how to do it, and you have to have a team of professionals to do it, or you're not going to make it. You're going to come off indie. And you're going to give yourself a bad name and everybody else with you.
Right. Years ago, about 20 years ago, I met James Altucher when I was working at an investment fund. And I remember around 2006 reading one of his first books to kind of give notes or something. And since then, he's written, dozens, I want to say. And he's proud that you can't tell, like the casual observer can't tell which is traditionally published and which is indie published. And I think that's kind of a sign of the times. I mean, what do you think the future is of quote unquote traditional publishing, Matthew?
Just looking at the industry as a whole, I think more traditional publishers are looking at like autobiographies and stuff like that, movie stars, sports figures, stuff like that.
How many Kardashian books can you get out? Yeah.
Right. Who the hell cares? I don't want to read that, but there's a market for it, and I think I think the advances go down. I remember a story with Stephen King when he left Viking, and because I think he was with, I want to say it was Tom Clancy was in the same publishing house, and he had such a big deal with Tom Clancy that he left Viking Publishing, and he thought he could go on his own. And a lot of the other publishers wouldn't deal with him because he wanted $16 million for a bag of bones. And a lot of publishers were like, we're not paying them. We don't care who you are. And that's how he got with Scribner. So I think traditional, they're scaling back how much advances they give you now. Because I think J.K. Rowling only got like $2,500. You know, her biggest thing was the
back of the royalty. Yeah, well,
her biggest thing was the movies. I mean, Warner Brothers came in. I mean, she got a huge slice of that.
Right.
That's really what propelled her. But the books were really good too. But I don't think the traditional route. They don't want to shed out a lot of money because they're not bringing a lot of money in. But if you're indie, it's like playing in the minor leagues in baseball. If you're good, you got good sales numbers. You can have a moderate publishing company approach you and say, "Hey, we really like what you're doing here. How's about signing with us? We work something out." That's one way indie can really help revitalize and maintain the traditional publishing route, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think writing a book is twofold in very broad strokes. There's the writing, and then there's the marketing. And I think many of the people who are attracted to writing their novel have very little to no interest in marketing. But you know, why not just keep it on your hard drive if no one's going to see it? So, what advice and tips do you have for people out there who are trying to sell copies of their books? And by people, I mean me. So what advice do you have?
I think you got to know your market, because you can't, if you're writing vampire books, you can't be selling it to like a romance novel, you know, people who read romance novels. It's not going to work. So I think you got to know your market. I think you also got to know your limitations as well, because not every book you write is going to land. You also have to use social media. Social media is such a big thing now. Whether you engage with those people or not, they're going to scroll through your name. They're going to see it and they're going, "Oh, he's got a book. Okay." You got to be able to hook somebody pretty fast these days, because it's like society's so ADHD. You got to be able to hook a reader in about 15 seconds. Yeah. And I didn't know that until my editor looked at Home Again and read it from last year and said, "This is a really good book, but it's boring as hell. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Boring?" I said, "It's really good." They're like, "Yeah, but I wanted to put it down after like the first 5 minutes." So she taught me how to get the reader hooked in really fast. And once I figured that out, it turned me into a totally different writer. So, but as far as marketing, I think social media, just for an indie writer, social media is a huge tool to have, but you can't spam everybody either, because they hate that as well. You have to kind of let the audience come to you. Put it out there, put your shingle out there, and kind of let the audience come to you. Have an online presence. I mean, you can pay. I got a writer friend of mine. He pays like $10,000-$15,000 a year just in marketing, and it's not really getting him anywhere.
Right.
Because it's all ads.
When shameless plug, when Greg Giraldo, A Comedian Story, came out, I talked to some publishing house, a publicity agent, and she said something like, "Oh, well, it's $12,000 a month, and we're not going to guarantee any sales increases, but we'll have the New York Times look at it or so." And I'm just like, no.
It's ridiculous.
Like, I mean, I guess there are enough people doing vanity projects out there that can afford that. But I mean, even if I could, I'm just like, so you're telling me you're not going to stick your neck out at all, but like that'll get like maybe some retweets from the New York Times. Like,
exactly.
And then I had to go more grassroots, and because I wrote about a comedian, I did a lot of podcasts with comedians, and I also went to when I would do shows, or I'd go to bookstores. And I had some decent success doing that, or just getting on the phone and saying, I have this book. How many copies can I give you, kind of thing. What worked for you? Like what were some of the better tactics?
I was really slow about getting on social media, because I'm not social media to me, I think it's a society killer. I try to stay off. I mean, I'm on Twitter quite a bit. I love Twitter. I think it's just really easy to engage with people pretty fast. Facebook is really good for your like community stuff. Like if you got friends that you grew up with, you lost contact with, or coworkers, whatever. I was really slow to get on Facebook, and once I got on Facebook, I understand why I was slow on Facebook, because it's terrible. Everybody has a public meltdown. I'm like, Jesus Christ! I work with these people. They're acting like that.
Everyone's trying to run for office and hate everyone who disagrees with them. It's a wonderful place.
Right. That's why I don't talk about politics on Facebook, because a lot of people they talk about politics, but they don't know about politics. They know what they've been taught.
Yeah, and they know they're right, and no one will change their mind, but they want to change your mind. Right.
Yeah. They spend a lot of time trying to tell you how you're wrong, and if you have a thought outside that box, they can't handle it. It's like you short circuit their mind, and they just can't do it. So you end up losing friends that way. You know, I've lost friends where I've had a different ideology on how things were or how I see things, and they're like, I just can't believe you do that. I'm like, what's how I see it?
Yeah.
You know, but you know, as far as marketing and stuff like that, I don't market through a lot of Facebook. I will let everybody know, hey, this is what I'm doing. You know, here you go. Here's a new book. Because me and my friends, I got some writer friends I grew up with. We're doing an anthology in October, and we were talking about how we're going to do the marketing. And I was like, look, me personally, I would rather just say, hey, here's a new book, you know, with my readership, because I've grown my readership from when I first started to like maybe 15. I've got about 145 now. And it's steadily increased. I mean, it took me a long time to get there. And even if I would have hit 50, I would have been fine with that, you know, as long as somebody's reading it, you know. But the marketing part of it is, there's really not a good way to market it. I haven't found that way, that golden egg, really.
Well, pay me $15,000 a month, and I will guarantee you no results, but you'll feel like you're doing something.
God, yes. That's a great Ponzi scheme.
I'm a publicist. Don't call it Ponzi. Don't insult me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go the Bitcoin way.
No. Ponzi scheme is probably more reputable than most publicists. I would
think
argue.
So. I believe you're right, because it really kills me how. What's scary to me is how much somebody believes in what they want to do and how much money they're willing to commit to it. And I'm like, you know, when you're talking, you know, $12,000, $15,000, I couldn't imagine that. There's no way. No way. I mean, I always run under that thing of, if it's a good book, they're going to find it. You know, I've been found by people in Seattle, Washington, and places like that, which, you know, I live in a really rural part of Tennessee, and for my book to get to Seattle, Washington, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't do anything. Word of mouth, and word of mouth is still a big thing. It's really still big. I know we got Facebook and stuff like that, but all it takes is one person saying, hey, this is a really good book, and then it just spreads.
Hear that, people? Word of mouth can beat Google's algorithm. So take that. You were very candid in some of the pre-interview work. You mentioned around 2014, you were dealing with some depression. And from what I know is you're never done with it. Can you share with us, you know, what it was and how you help cope with it?
Depression is, I've learned how to get a really good handle on it. I think what I always equated depression with is being on a hamster wheel. You know, how your mind will, you know, we've all had defeats and we've all had, you know, things that didn't go our way, but depression to me is one of those things that it never goes away from you. You constantly have to battle it. I don't really have a trick to figure out how to deal with it every day. You know, I just wake up and deal best you can. every day gets a little bit better, and then some days you'll have a setback. But depression, it's really grabby. And I know people that's had it, and they're still battling it. I still battle it sometimes, because you start thinking backwards about how things used to be. Why did this happen? So you're really like, you get down, and then those low days could be 2 or 3 days in a row. And some days you snap out of it, some days you don't. And those people, that don't end up killing themselves. And that's bad. I mean, I've been low before. I've hit some low times, and those thoughts really do cross your mind, because at that point you're just like, why would I even want to keep going? Why be here? There's no value. You start to think there's nobody with you. You start thinking that you're on an island by yourself, and it's a really slippery slope when you get into that, because you really box yourself out from everybody else. But we all have had things that happen to us, and it really depends on how your mind can bounce back from some of that stuff.
And how? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
How has being a writer helped you deal with depression?
It's helped me a lot, just because I can work some stuff out with these characters. Any writer that's good will put a lot of themselves in their characters. And that really helps. It helped me deal with a lot of different things, because I could come up with a story, and it may not be the main character, but each character will have characteristics of what's been going on in my life, and then that's me working it out. Okay. Writing really saved me a lot, because I've talked to therapists and stuff like that, over the years, and just recently, as a couple of years ago, with my divorce, and they give you a lot of really good tools to use, but at the end of the day, you still got to deal with it.
You still have to do it. Yeah.
You
have
really
to do the work.
Yeah, I mean, they give you all these cliches, and they give you all these really cool insights and things you can use in your toolbox, but you still, at the end of the day, after you're done with the therapist, you still got to deal with yourself. And that's sometimes the hardest person to deal with, is trying to deal with yourself and try to fix yourself, because nobody's going to fix yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. No one's going to fix yourself. No. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about depression?
I don't really know. I think that you can be depressed and still have a pretty productive life. Just because, people think that if you're depressed, you're not getting out of bed, you give up on life. And I guess that's true with some cases, extreme cases. I've known people that just have shut down life, lost their job, lost their house, because they just can't do it. There's something in their mind that just bogs them down. It's like a high functioning alcoholic. They can be an alcoholic, but they can still function. They can
still be at work on time, and they're not tripping over their feet, getting out of the car.
They've got the red eyes, so they got the wild turkey smell. So but they can still function. I mean, when you've got depression, to me at least, what I go through, I can still function and be okay. But sometimes things will happen, and you regress back to a mentality that you had maybe 10 years ago. You just get really down yourself, and it snowballs. You get on that hamster wheel, and then you make a turn on the corner, and you're okay. So writing really helped me with that. I don't know what other people do, but that's how I cope.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a passion and something that kind of helps calm the mind chatter a little bit, and you're able to have a productive outlet. And you've been at this for a while. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you started as a writer?
To listen to other people, because that was that was a big thing. Because when you're young, you're like, I know what I'm doing.
That's good life advice too.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Whatever. You don't know, and then you find out that you really don't know as much as you think you do. So I failed a lot. I think I got successful because I failed so much. It only takes a couple of times looking like an idiot before you figure out, okay, maybe I need some help. So I went out and got some professional people in their field, and I said, here's what I want to do. I want to build, a team, pretty much like the Avengers. So where I'm looking for a team. I was looking for somebody that say, I need an editor that could say, hey, this is what we need to do because this is what's going to make it sound right. I needed a proofer who could catch all the little typos. I need a really good cover artist.
They're amazing.
I had a 100 and the Scarecrows and Shadows that was produced this year had 136,759 word count. The proofer I had missed one word. And it was there.
Was your proofer a computer or a human being?
Okay. No, it was human. I've dealt with the AI stuff, and I wasn't really. Have you tried the AI stuff?
No, I have not. I mean,
I do not. Don't like it.
There was one grammar program I tried, and it wasn't awful, but the book I wrote had so many quotes from people, and they're going to have imperfections when they speak. So it was going a little haywire. So it was not a great experience for me.
No, I don't like the AI. I tried it myself, and I was just like, it got a lot of stuff confused, and I was just like, nah, I'd rather go back with a human, because they're going to catch the context of it. And that's a lot of times you got to have the context of it and how the word is used.
Sure. Oh, context is everything. And I'd like to know, Matthew, what are some achievements that you're most proud of?
Oh, man. Just in the book sense?
However you want to answer it. Yeah, it couldn't be the book sense. It could be your life. It could be a combination of the two. Aside from being on the Matt Balaker podcast, which clearly is, the peak of the mountain. But
before this, I have climbed the peak for sure.
It's a nice view. I understand.
It is. It's a
aside
great
from this.
I think one of the things I really am proud of is being a dad. That was, if you're a good dad, it's hard to find good dads. I know a lot of terrible dads out there. And when I see a dad taking care of his kids, going out to the park with them, passing baseball with them out in the yard, I really admire people like that. And that's what I want. That was the kind of dad I wanted to be, and I was. And that's one of the biggest things I'm most proud of is having the pleasure of being a dad. So I would never change that for anything. Writing wise, I think it's when somebody comes up to you that you don't know and they say, "Hey man, your book really meant a lot to me." I had that happen to me as there was a biker. He was part of a biker gang.
Yeah. Please share with it. Yeah.
He was. I thought I had cut him off or something. I didn't know who this guy was. He's 6'7", prototypical biker. He got the chaps, the do-rag, the tats, everything. And he'd been looking for me for a while. This was back in 2007. And, I think MySpace was a big thing back then, Of course, I wasn't on that either. And he finds me and he says, "Hey," he says, are you Matt McConkey? And I'm like, "Yeah." And he says, "I just want you to know." And before he even says anything else, I'm like, "I'm going to get my ass beat right here."
right.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, "God, I've cut this guy off somewhere. What did I do?" I didn't even realize I did it.
Yeah.
And he says that, "I just want you to know that we took your book. Your book got to Sturgis, South Dakota, and me and my biker club read it, and we really liked it." I didn't know what to say. I'm like, "You read that?" He says, "Oh, yeah." He says, "We like that you just sound like a normal person and you didn't swallow a dictionary." So he hits me on the arm and says, "Keep going." And I was like, "Wait a minute, how did you find me?" And he's, friend of a friend of a friend, whatever. I was like, "Okay."
It's like, "I've been following you since Sturgis."
Jesus Christ. That scared me. And that really got me to where I didn't want to write anymore under my real name. So I went under a pen name for a while because I was like, this is kind of weird. This guy, he was coming back from Sturgis to go back to Gainesville, Florida, because that's where he lived. And I was like, God, this guy found me. I don't like that. So I started going under different names for a while. And then, of course, book sales were really bad during that period. And then I got with my editor, and they're like, you really want to get your sales back up, you need to get back under your real name. And that's what I did. And then it started picking back up. But yeah, those were some scary years. I just didn't want to come back out into the public for a while.
You don't want too many bikers complimenting your work.
No, I mean, I'm glad they did.
I know. I'm just messing with you.
I kind of feel like Hunter S. Thompson, when he wrote that book about the Hells Angels, it kind of scares you. You don't know, but you don't know these days.
Yeah, you don't know how people are going to react. It only takes one weirdo. Yeah, I hear you. So I'd like to get your thoughts, Matthew, on what are you most optimistic about in terms of the future of writing and publishing?
I think it's going to pretty much stay the same way. I think the status quo that you have with traditional versus indie, I don't think that's really going to change much. I think you're still going to have people that want to be entrepreneurs, because that's exactly what doing a book is. It's just starting your own business. You're creating your own brand. It's no different than starting a clothing line. So I don't think that's ever going to quit. I think the technology is going to get more sophisticated. I really don't know how the traditional people, I don't know how they keep up anymore, unless they snag a guy or a girl that hits it really big indie. But if they hit it big indie, then why would they go to a traditional publisher? They're making more money from Amazon.
Sure.
Because Absolutely. Amazon gives you, if you were to publish through Amazon, you get 60% royalty. And to me, that's quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
If you're talking $600 off every 1,000. I don't know if a traditional publisher would do that, unless somebody got the movie company got the rights to that. But I don't see anything really changing. I think the way it's going now is probably the way it's going to be. I don't think indie publishing is going to evolve much. I don't see how it can. Traditional publishers got more to lose than indie. That's because true. if they don't find a way to get more talent, I don't know what they're going to do. Because if the talent's smart and you're selling books better on your own than you are with a traditional, why would you go to a traditional? Unless they can guarantee you like $250,000 advance, but they're not going to do that. So there's no way. I just don't see it happening. And I tell people, I'm like, you could do reviews. You can have reviews on your books and stuff like that. But writing's so subjective. Reviews, it's like when you go to Rotten Tomatoes, some of my favorite movies are reviewed like garbage.
Sure.
And I'm like, how the hell can you hate Clue? That was a great movie. So, but I don't know. I don't think the indie versus tradition, I don't think indie's going to change much. I think it's going to keep going, and you're just going to start seeing more of it, if that's even possible. But yeah, that's the only thing I think is changing. You're just going to see more subject stuff.
We're looking forward to more of your work coming out. And where can people out there buy your books and learn more about what you're up to next, Matthew?
You can go onto my website. It's Matthew McConkey indiebooks.blogspot.com, because I'm cheap and I do it for free. I don't go pay for a website. So somebody said, why don't you just do a .com? And I'm like, why? I had to pay for that. You pay $25 for that. So it's the same information on a free website. So, and I'm also on Amazon. I really like the way Amazon does. That's who handles all my publishing stuff. So, and you can go on Amazon.com and order anything that's still relevant. Because I think there's several books they're not available. Because I'd worked with different publishers before, and they were only limited runs. Because right now, I just finished up with a novel that's coming out next April called Maple Lane. It'll be hitting, I think, April 5th, I believe, next year. Doing research on the Nixon book. I'm crazy about Richard Nixon, so been researching that one for the last 4 or 5 years. And then me and my writing pals, we've got an anthology coming out this October called Just Around Sundown. So that I'm really proud of that, because I was able to work with these guys that I've been wanting to work with for a very long time. So I've read some of the stories that everybody's contributed, and I'm like, this is going to be a knockout.
Well, I'm excited for that. Matthew McConkey, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me on, man. It's been a blast. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.